Well, hello, evening all. I hope you're all well. Here we were in the village of the damned again. Power cuts may happen, thunder out there. But anyway, hopefully having a good evening or a good day at least. Have you ever seen anyone, by the way, as excited as the doctor was in 73 yards to be in Wales? I've never known that in my life. We were down to get out. It was always raining. That would be an interesting global message on Disney streaming that, come to Wales. My God, he was so excited, wasn't he? I didn't understand that. Intriguingly, as the ratings pushed Doctor Who up from episode 3 by 580,000, was a Doctor Who light episode just what the Doctor ordered? What does that suggest about the characterization and presentation of the Doctor and the decision to open the season with Space Babies and Devil's Cord? I'm sure there must be questions being asked now. After the first two, the show loses 560,000, and now it bounces to just past its starting position, still millions lower than the specials and Christmas episode. Now, we will discuss the ratings, of course, ratings watcher in a moment. Even if you were engaged with the episode, was that a Doctor Who episode? Did it feel like Doctor Who or something else? Is Russell Davies struggling to write for proper Doctor Who nowadays? We will debate. We start with our burning issues and contentious points, of course, before judging the episode and rating it, with fun, amusement, and insightful comments along the way, with dialogue doctors and various other segments. And do help us push along to 400 subscribers, please. We're a new growing channel, and we do want to grow our community of sensible Doctor Who fans who like good debate, unpredictable chat, and not an echo chamber of the same point repeated ad nauseum. We will praise when necessary, and equally we will criticise when it is deserved. And we can freely do that as we are all die-hard, dedicated, well-informed Doctor Who fans. This is our platform, so welcome my panellists tonight. If I just... That would help, wouldn't it? There we go. I could blame the power, but it's not. That's
I know, my heart skipped a beat there for a second. I thought, oh no.
It's me. It's like the good old days. Hugh will remember this, Hugh, won't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, having a cup of tea in the middle of a Doctor Who thread and all the rest of it, you know me, and then the tunnel. Hiya, Rachel.
Hi. It's glad to see you here, Brendan,
Thanks to Brendan for giving us the Doctor Who opening that we did.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We didn't get it last night.
I should have said there was cleverness there, that I was actually having a Brendan light episode.
Yeah, did you break the circle?
I broke something. Anyway, might be the chair. But, well, where do we start? I think we have to start, where. It seems to be our obsession as fans, isn't it? To talk about whether this season, whether each episode is actually coping. And so, of course, let's start with The
Watcher.
That should have been the music in Legopolis every time the Watcher appeared on screen. That would have been great.
Well, it could have helped stop that idea of entropy and decay and that doom-ridden effect. David Mullen, stick with us. He says 73 Yards is currently on BBC Three. There's BBC Three in the Demons, as we said on Friday night. I mean, yeah, we know. Right, okay, update. Well, episode 4 has bounced. It's bounced as far as Space Babies got. Way! So, are we all delighted?
Well, it's certainly better than I expected. I think word of mouth might have actually paid off here. I think so. There were some pretty good reviews for it, so...
I would have thought as well, having Sian Phillips for those of us of a certain age was a big sell. I mean that's big name.
And can I also put out there, if you are a casual viewer who knows Doctor Who can get nutty sometimes, and you're not following every week, you have seen adverts with Space Babies and in space. You've seen one that looked all a bit way out there, musical. You've seen another spacey one for Boom, and then suddenly the advertised one where it looks as though it's in a pub and it's set on Earth and it looks realistic and modern. I mean, I tell you what, that sells it every time.
Well, it does, and certainly what baffles me is someone like Russell T Davies can go and write something as crazy as and stupid as Space Babies, and then come back and write something like 73 Yards. I mean, we've all got mixed opinions on it, certainly here tonight, but it was certainly a darn sight better than Space Babies, that's for sure. And Boom.
Well, for me, though, we'll get into it obviously later. I just thought my initial reaction, even as I was watching it, was my frustration kind of increased throughout the episode, because I realized that, or at least my perception of it, for me, I felt like it was like a huge bait and switch. All of the previews and all of the promotion promised one type of episode, which we got for maybe 10 minutes. And then it became something completely different. And I thought, was this intentional, that they weren't giving us even a glimpse that it was going to be anything else other than this kind of gothic, moody, atmospheric type of story we used to get all the time in classic Who? Maybe they realized that maybe that was the way to kind of bring disaffected fans back, is make it seem like we get an entire episode which kind of felt like the old days.
I wasn't so disappointed because I hadn't looked at it and thought it was going to be that. I think some of the publicity for it seemed to say, oh, gothic, etc. But I mean, my first reaction, which in terms of seeing the trailers for it last week and starting to think about it, was that it looked like an episode of Inside Number 9, which you might not be familiar with.
Yeah.
But and for 30 minutes, it's almost exactly 30 minutes long, the bit in the village and the pub, till Ruby Sunday leaves, is almost exactly 30 minutes, which is the runtime of an Inside Number 9.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure that it was that long. I thought it was.
I think the gothic part of it is, sort of like the Dutch angles and stuff like that. The gothic part of it, until she's staying there and then gets asked to leave. But it's 30 minutes when it's 29 minutes and 53 seconds. A sad person that I am whenever she leaves.
Well, let's kind of look at some of the details about this ratings, because there's a few interesting theories going on in the thread. So, for example, hello, Darren Upken. The bounce was probably due to the FA Cup final being not long before. Can I just show you Darren Upken as an example? Because I've got the data here. Because there you go. So the FA Cup final pulled in 44% of its audience, 2:30, 3 o'clock kickoff. Now, can I just say, all those people who've been saying, oh, because Britain had good weather, Space Babies and Devil's Cord lost out. The FA Cup final managed to get 4 million, and that was in the middle of the blooming day. So, we don't live in darkness in Britain. So, these theories are all over the shop, but I can see what you're saying, Darren.
Bren, we're back, though, at the fact that the FA Cup final is a live thing, and you can't say, if you're going to watch it, I'm going to go and watch it. I also think that the FA Cup final gets a large amount of its viewing in that figure from public performances of it as well in pubs, etc. So it's a different type of program.
It is, but the thing is, as I could see, Darren Upken is saying that it maybe was down to the bounce. I don't know if he's being ironic, but it finished at tea time, and as you know, Doctor Who was another hour and a half or so later. It wouldn't sustain, I don't think, that long. People chop around too quickly. The regional news at 6:45 on BBC got down to 3 million, and then of course, Doctor Who picked up on that, really. But
no, it didn't. But that's what I'm noticing, because I'm looking at this for the first time, Bren. If you look at this, I'm just trying to kind of sort out the chronology of these things. So it goes from BBC News, which got 2.7 million, and then there's a bump up at 8:45 at the BBC Regional News to get to 3, and then 5 minutes later, 400,000 people dropped out because it went from 3 million to 2.6 million.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the big ratings winner, and I know we will have people in the thread who are watching this who will troll me later and they'll say, but Doctor Who's one of the best. It was number 5. Well, actually 73 Yards is currently 28th best for the week in the overnight charts. So when people want to keep telling me that, oh, it's number 1 in Haiti on the Disney charts, it's number 5 in Bolivia, it's 28th in Britain, and I would love somebody to tell me of another program in Britain with this amount of marketing and this amount of hype and this amount of money thrown at it. The wheel just has a spinning wheel. It'll be expensive as a game show, but that's it. The 1% Club, again, it'll have a nice set, but that's it. No marketing. Britain's Got Talent, set in the theatre. You have cheap audition acts. Come on. Where's the money being spent? The money's being spent on Doctor Who and the hype. And to be 28th in the week, I would suggest is pretty poor.
And I think the big question is that if they'd leaned in the marketing to pushing the fact that Ncuti wasn't really in this episode, the ratings probably would have been a lot higher.
Well, John Yulden has suggested, I forgot Albania. Sorry about that. Albania, they pull in. Albanian used to really like Norman Wisdom. Maybe we need a Norman Wisdom character in Doctor Who. That's what we needed.
Mr. Grimsdale, Mr. Grimsdale.
We need more slapstick. Oh, don't tell Bruminati D that. Oh my God.
Please don't tell him that.
No.
Its main competition, though, Doctor Who at the moment is Britain's Got Talent, and that is averaging right now in its current run around 7 million viewers. It's averaging. That's what it's averaging.
Well, I don't know the figures for the actual people who are on streaming. Crimplane was one of them. I watched it just gone midnight on Friday. Gosh, staying up late, man. I nearly stayed up because we did our Friday night end of week show, and I nearly stayed up and thought, oh God, I can't watch Doctor Who at midnight. Honestly, I want to sleep afterwards. If I'm triggered, I'm in big doo-doo. So, Dada Debaser, people were too drunk to find the TV remote after the FA Cup final.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I mean,
but they managed to do it after the regional news.
I'm just curious whether I'm going to ask anybody in the chat. Is anybody in the chat watching these at the big viewing parties that RTD was saying that is the best way to watch these things?
Well, one of our panelists in California did say he was at a very, very big to watch it, but then he said he couldn't hear it. So I mean, it was such a popular event that he couldn't hear the dialogue. So I'm not sure if I'd really want to do that. Now, Paul Bowler, hello, good to see you. We will get into the nuts and bolts of this, but 73 Yards is a big tonal shift for this series. In the end, though, it ultimately faltered because of the frustrating ambiguity of its premises. And we will, as you know, Paul, this program, we'll start with the ratings. We'll then hit some of the contentious issues and problems and plot holes. And, if I just give a shout out to the lady who does the chatting, not the shout outs, Rachel here, you did a stream last night on what? 25,000 plot holes, was it?
It felt like 20,000 plot holes.
So, yes, we will, Paul Bowler, be looking at that, don't you, Rory?
Oh, yeah, we will.
And if we miss any out, go to Rachel's stream from last night and she'll make sure you don't leave.
I liked Peter Harrison's comment that it's giving mixed messages about touching grass.
Very.
Well, as several posts I saw on Facebook in the last couple of days with the shot of Ncuti touching grass, they were going, well, Ncuti touches grass and vanishes just like the audience. So I thought that was.
And then the audience came back.
I was just thinking, to Brendan's point about the ratings this season, if you were to mark this like on a graph, you'd have it already starting low, and then it would bottom out, and then it would come back up to just kind of where it was. And for being already halfway through the season, I don't really think that's kind of a graph that they're happy with.
No, as I said in my intro, there will be questions about that surely, because it says that they've got something wrong. The schedule's wrong, the content wrong, the order wrong, the sequence, something they've got wrong, because they did a double banker, didn't they? We got a double bill. that obviously clearly let down an awful lot of their, target market, who disappeared for a little while. There is a guess that a lot of people did watch Boom on streaming or iPlayer or catch up, and then decided to come back maybe and give it another go. But that's not good enough. Normally RTD and the showrunners want to build to the climax, in this case in episode 8. But the other detail I wanted to show you, because we're starting to get the AI in now. This is from Gary Lee, and Gary Lee is suggesting these are the rumors of the audience appreciation. So for Space Babies 74 and for Devil's Cord 73, lower than Jodie's Worst. So if I just make that a bit bigger so that you can see a bit more, that's Jodie's last season. And these are the rumors for the audience index 74 and 73. So when people have been telling us heavily and actively and passionately on Twitter that Space Babies is the best they've ever seen, you are allowed that opinion. The trouble is, it seems like a lot of people aren't thinking the same thing.
Those would be very bad numbers.
They're low, aren't they? I mean, you can see Power of the Doctor got 82. Legend of the Sea Devils got 76. I mean, hello.
There's not much more you can say there.
My guess is if those two numbers are right, my guess is probably Boom will probably be higher than that.
Yeah.
And this one will probably be higher.
Yeah.
But you see,
I think definitely.
But you see, we've got half the season now. We've got rumors of 2 very bad audience indexes. We've now got the ratings overnights for half the season. Nobody surely can argue that this is a success or a runaway success, or this is what they anticipated. I mean, Rachel, is this where you were hoping we would be as a Doctor Who fan? Is this where you thought we were going to get after the build up to it? Is this roughly where you expected?
I was expecting it to be higher because it was Russell T Davies, but it's not. I mean, I had no expectations what to expect from like Shooty or Millie, but there you go. I mean, the fact that it's possibly potentially performing lower in Jodie, and I know a lot of people don't set high score with Jodie's Doctor, but it says a lot. It speaks volumes. Come back, Jodie, all is forgiven.
Yeah, like I said on Friday's show, Brandon, I think that it's kind of clear. It's pretty clear now that the decision to start the season with Space Babies was a catastrophic mistake.
But it raises other questions, doesn't it? It raises questions about the whole team down there. Because, okay, I've got a rushed idea. My name's RTD. It's this Space Babies plot. And somebody else in the team surely will say, really? We were hoping to go a bit bigger, Russell, at the beginning. Really? We were hoping to give a classic Doctor Who at the beginning, Russell. Really, Russell? We were hoping to get them behind the sofa in episode 1. Russell, really? And this is the beauty of audience in indexes, isn't it? It is that those people who said, the ratings, you're killjoys, you lot. Okay, then let's park that for a second. But when you see the audience appreciation is very low, I'm sorry, but this is not landing. And add the reviews on top, and add the fact that there's no word of mouth in the UK about Doctor Who at all.
The other thing is, I'm a bit like Rachel. I didn't really have an expectation in terms of what this would be. And I still don't, to an extent. I think figures are so changeable now, and the method of watching has changed, so that it's difficult to do. I think the most damning one about that is if it is the 28th watch programme across the UK in a week, I think you'd be aiming for it to be top 10. Maybe not in the top 5, but top 10 certainly.
Yeah. All they can do is trumpet, online. You'll see one day throughout the week, somebody say, hey, Doctor Who was in the top 10 on Disney Plus. Well, yeah, for a day.
Yeah.
Until it fell out.
Before Rachel comes in, I'll agree with Mr. Wick. Yeah, I'm parking it for the sake of an argument for those who like to criticize, but I'm bringing in another piece of data which is damning. You can't park the ratings. It's the ultimate metric. I remember on Friday night me saying to Rachel, actually, as an actress, that you need to fill theatres. It's no good saying, we've got a real quality production, but nobody's buying the tickets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I agree with you, Mr. Wick. What were you going to say, Rachel?
I was thinking that the midnight release of the BBC iPlayer is kind of shooting itself in the foot a little bit, because the issue is with that is then people go on to Twitter, and obviously Twitter is a cesspool, X, I guess, as you now call it, it's a cesspool for all this negative reviewing and things like that. So people who've watched it in advance will go in and onto Twitter and say these things, and people will be like, well, if they don't like it, there's no point in watching it. So there you go, you've already lost a view.
Yeah. And I am struggling with this idea. I know it might be the modern world, but I don't think it creates event TV for Doctor Who. And I think Doctor Who needs to be event TV to get the word of mouth, to get that punch, because it is very like, to me, I think something like at the Line of Duty, where everyone's going, who's H? Who's H? People in the pub are saying, who's H? Doctor Who could have gone dark for a little while, got people asking questions and talking about it. And by streaming it, all I know is I wake up in the morning and there's a whole lot of people who say they've seen it. And isn't it funny? Is it something about Doctor Who fans, or is it just people on Twitter that they have to tell you that they've seen it, and they have to tell you, oh, that bit at the end, and they have to show you a photograph of what's in it. So in the end, I have to always avoid Twitter, which is madness, and avoid online social media. Or basically, we've got a whole load of killjoys who want to stay up till midnight, which, may I say, sounds a bit antisocial to me. And then, of course, those people who watch it at a normal time suddenly get it all spoiled. That's not going to help the ratings at all, is it, Hugh? Because it's just spoiling it.
I watched it this morning. I think I said this last week. Part of the reason why I'm not watching it whenever it's on a Saturday night, which is where I would choose to watch it, is that after watching Space Babies, my wife decided that she wasn't going to watch it ever again. So therefore, I can't do that on a Saturday night. So I then have to watch it elsewhere. And that's just one of those things where, Kath's watched pretty much everything of Doctor Who. She didn't watch all of Chibnall, but she got through sort of like from 2005 to second series of Jodie. And she just gave up in Space Babies.
Yeah.
Fair.
Are we does anybody think we're at the point yet? Because I'm honestly not sure. I'm actually on the fence about this. Are we at the point where anybody thinks we can play the come back, Chris Chibnall, all is forgiven card yet?
Oh, Gary, there's no way. Do you know what was part of our argument on Friday night? That the argument is none of them come back now. It's a friends club. Yeah. We need new, fresh.
Well, no, I don't mean literally, but I mean just in terms of a me saying come back, Chibs, all is forgiven. Not
Archibald Lazarus, I think it was earlier on in the chat, said that they watched a stream that started something like a comeback Jodie, all is forgiven, or something like that. So if some people
the chat is like no Chibnall.
Well, I mean,
I agree, no Chibnall.
Yeah. One thing I'd say is, I don't think the Flux worked as a story, but dear God, you could see the money on that one.
Yeah.
You saw the money.
Yeah.
We're not seeing it.
And I do want to say to MAFC, who you've watched us before, and I appreciate you coming round. I was surprised to see how negative Twitter was after I watched this episode. Yeah. And the Fab Four panel you've got here, we cover every rating you could get in our 4 levels of rating. We go from outstanding down to oblivion on this episode. So basically, you will hear a fair spread of opinion. I can guarantee you that, because I don't know what the panel's going to say, but I've got their ratings just so I can compile.
And can I say that as opposed to that other Fab Four from a couple of weeks ago, we actually look like ourselves.
I certainly look like my headshot, that's for sure.
That's right.
So ratings to me tells me that they've got the sequence wrong. It tells me Russell Davies did not want to deliver sub Chris Chibnall ratings. He did not want to deliver audience appreciation sub Chris Chibnall. He didn't. He wants to be the big showrunner who puts his arm around the others because he's the godfather of Doctor Who. This is not selling well at all. And I think the big question in Disney and Bad Wolf and the BBC will be, how did we get the content wrong? How did we get the sequence wrong? And of course, the elephant in the room is season 2 was completed this week. So it's locked up, it's done, and they can't change that.
Well, you said it on Friday, Brandon. You made the point that it seems like what they're trying to do is RTD. If please, I hope I'm kind of getting what you said accurate. You said that as opposed to having a sequence that kind of is organic, as a whole and kind of builds, this one, it's like, oh, we have, a light one set in space, and then we can have a musical, and then we can have, a Western, and we can have one of this, and then we can have one of this. And you're dumping, one of every single type of genre show into this season, and it's not fitting together, right? Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah.
I think it's worse than that to an extent, in the sense that I think you can get away with a lot of genre stuff, but before we started the show, you were talking about the Bridgerton one coming up, and that's coming up after the Black Mirror one. And I think this was effectively an Inside Number 9 one. I think it's not so much genre as effectively doing other shows.
And
Peter's, I got to say, Peter's, before we go to it, Peter's comment there was genius. That actually answers one of my unanswered questions. I think maybe the one thing that the old woman was saying to all those people, she was saying Chris Chibnall's coming back as showrunner.
Yes.
That's why they were all running away screaming.
Or the RTD's old line as well with Harriet Jones. Don't you think she looks tired? Don't you think the writing's tired? Don't you think the writing's lazy? I mean, I don't know. I think we need new showrunners. I agree with the MCTV. It's tired that we have RTD, Moffat, Chibnall, and now RTD2 with Moffat back. He's obviously tried to get Chibnall back. Who are not, and this is important, who are not fanboys, lifelong fanboys of the show. Get somebody like Philip Hinchcliffe or Barry Letts, who's a very competent, skilled producer who knows about the way to put together an entertaining television production. Not that they're so beholden to their lifelong personal fandom. That's what we need. And just to move on,
stop putting in Easter eggs and stuff like that for people who've watched it for 60 years. I'm not interested in referencing. I occasionally, fair enough, if you do stuff. Whenever they started and they mentioned the Macra, and everyone goes, "Oh, why I remember not seeing that." It's just over the top and indulgent.
Well, let's just do. I'll wrap up with one or two points before we come to our contentious issues, as you know and love we do in this program. So, MAFC, I think the shortened season length is a detriment to the season. The general audience will miss normal Doctor Who episodes. I think with a short season, you need a cohesive structure. It needs to be recognizable every week, whether it's dark or whatever. And so I know what Hugh's saying about the different genres, and it sometimes worked before. The issue is that RTD's version of different genres, a bit like you were saying, Hugh, is it's just saying, I'm going to do a bit of Bridgerton. I'm going to do a bit of Buffy. I'm going to do a bit of another TV program. I mean, in the episode coming up, Rogue, the actual... Ruby actually says, "Oh, this is like Bridgerton." You think, "Oh, for God's sake!" We're even referencing other programs. It's a bit like she'll say Coronation Street in an episode, and you think, "This is getting silly." RTD. Anyway, so I agree with you there, MAFC. I think we do need to get there. Michelle, who obviously has been busy today, she's normally on, said, "I said that this season was going to be experimental and that Russell Davies was going to throw Jello on the wall to see what sticks." I do think
he's throwing something on the wall. Uh-oh. Is Brandon? Lightning.
Or power cut.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Michelle, Hugh, and Gary show. We've got a great show.
Well, a great lineup for you, Flair.
Right. We'll be taking calls, from our chat. No, hopefully
is he back?
Well, hopefully if it's frozen, he'll just be rebooting.
I saw that Jamie was on the chat, so maybe Jamie knows what's going on.
One of the people in the chat zapped a virus into Brendan's setup.
Yeah.
But yeah, because he'll be coming back. But I think though, I know Rachel in her video, which is great. If anybody hasn't watched it, go watch her analysis of this episode. You were explaining the probable reasons why this was a Dr. Light episode, right?
There
Or
could
your
be.
guess, right?
Well, the reason why the Doctor wasn't there is something for real that happened in real life. He was signed on for another series of sex education, so he had to go and fulfill that contract before completing Doctor Who.
And that was being filmed concurrently?
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I believe this was the first script that Millie Gibson actually got for Doctor Who. And it may have been, I'm not entirely sure, I might be wrong, but it may have been the first one filmed as well.
Oh, this episode was?
Possibly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Possibly from what she was saying, but I might have that wrong. Just hands up, might have that wrong. But the reason why it was Dr. Light was because Ncuti wasn't actually available. He had to fulfill the contract he already signed.
And I want to, MCTV had a great comment before about how there was like, this episode was like the plethora of older ladies. We had Mrs. Flood coming back. We had old Ruby, and we had
Sean Phillips' character.
Sean Phillips' character. Yeah, this was like all of the all those people brought back in this one. And I got to say that, you know, speaking of Sean Phillips, who I love, who I thought was just kind of wasted, as Hugh said, kind of stunt casting. The one thing I was thinking of, especially in that scene, the scene that she was in, I was kind of thinking about like the power of voice, which I don't know how old she is, but that her voice
90?
is just, oh my gosh.
She's her voice is still so, her voice, I think she's still 91 or 92, wow. But she's definitely 90.
I mean, her voice is still so, has that power to just kind of compel your attention. What Con Baker obviously had, you know, just in the voice, that alone can grip you. And yeah, she still has that. That's just amazing.
Just to note, she was at RADA in the same year as Diana Rigg and Glenda Jackson.
Oh wow!
Which is a bit of a.
Wow! Okay.
Is this a case where does she? Because I apologize for not knowing. Does she still do regular acting, or is this a thing where she's kind of like semi-retired and she was kind of enticed back for this?
The thing is, you can never really retire an actor. I know so many actors who don't retire. It's like John Nettles. There's an actor here in the UK called John Nettles, and he is one of his most famous programs was Bergerac and Midsummer Murders, and he left Midsummer Murders to retire. So that's what he did, and then he later rocked up in Poldark. So it's just like they don't retire. It's impossible to get them to.
I think she's been doing bits, certainly. So obviously not big C, not sort of like a long seas or anything like that, but she's certainly been doing bits over the last few years. But you're right, the voice is incredibly powerful for that age.
Yeah. Very much so.
And I've got to say, I mean, I guess I'm kind of like a Luddite. I mean, I do acknowledge the existence of like modern technology. I was really kind of drawn into that pub scene, but for some reason, when I saw the big screen on the wall and then the little card pay thing, that pulled me out. And I know that they have those things in pubs now, but I was expecting kind of like a 60s or 70s Doctor Who pub where it's just kind of like right out of the 19th century or something.
Well, you're meant to expect that. I mean, that's the switch. It's the joke in terms of saying that. And I think it's. I think it was one of those things where you do the whole thing. It's like an American Werewolf in London, and you walk into the pub and everyone goes silent, and that's then you're undercut. So that was obviously deliberate.
We have to answer Crippling Doubloon's question right now, which I'm not I would say for the moment. Crippling, is this the Brendan Light stream? Well, there's a lightning factor which hopefully he is working on restoring. but
He wouldn't
I
go out
mean,
and touch grass with the thunder that's been going on all day anyway.
I mean, in the meantime, should we? What do you think? I mean, should we start talking about maybe like the first criteria? And I'll leave it up to you.
I think we have to, otherwise
Okay. All right.
we're sort of like busting a bit.
Well, okay. So, let's jump into the first criteria, which is safeguarding of food, which is, does it feel like an actual? What is it? Does it feel like an actual Who episode? And does the Doctor have recognizable Doctor traits?
Woohoo!
I actually think the Doctor was most recognizable in this than he's ever been, mostly because he was off screen most of the time.
Yes, I dubbed him Fisherman Doctor because he looked like a fisherman. That's what I thought. I mean, the question
I
was
saw a
bad,
comment
it's
last
just-
night. Somebody said he's dressed like Sarah Jane in this Antaran experiment. I said, you know
Oh,
what, you're
really?
right.
Yeah. Yes.
Brendan says he's trying to reboot. I sent him a message to see if it all
Okay.
was good.
Did
so
you
he's
tell
trying
him
to
that we're
reboot.
soldiering on?
Yeah, he said burning issues, please.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Okay.
Burning issues.
Further
Well,
issues.
normally, I mean, Brendan.
Direction from beyond the power cut.
Okay. There you go. All right. Well, a burning issue then. We'll leave category 1 though for later.
Okay.
So I mean, but doesn't Brendan normally choose the burning issue, or do we just we
No, we just do our own. I think so.
Okay.
Like so from that.
Well,
So,
Yeah.
have at it.
Okay. Who would like to start?
so I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's something which may be addressed in the future, but it's what on earth does she say in 10 seconds to make people run away, including all the people that she did? It's not believable in that part. I will allow it as a possible explanation in the future and something that's a bit of a MacGuffin, but that seemed to me the obvious what's going on there.
Okay. Cool. I haven't heard that word in a long time, MacGuffin.
I'm a Hitchcock fan, so
I was just gonna yes.
Gary?
Well, I mean, let me just clarify. For burning issues, are we talking about like a plot hole or an overall issue with the episode?
It's the thing that sort of like most annoys you, or you most think is worrying, or something.
Yeah.
Because I mean, later on, I'm going to go into my kind of like 20 plot hole questions under the category of just kind of storytelling.
Yeah, it's the big headline
incompetence.
Worry.
Well, so I guess well, the one of the questions we normally discuss is, were we happy with the resolution? And my response to that would be like, what resolution? It doesn't even seem like there's really even an attempt to explain anything.
Yeah.
To me, the episode didn't resolve anything. It just stopped. And okay. Here, I finally stumbled into what my big issue would be. Nothing against Millie Gibson, honestly, and who I think is a very capable. I didn't see her in, what was she on, EastEnders? Emmerdale. But I mean, clearly, if she's given something to work with, I think that she normally does good, and she did. Rachel, as you said in your stream, I mean, she does kind of step up and kind of carry what is there to carry. But at this point, we're halfway through the season. I just still have zero investment in Ruby's arc. I just don't care. There's nothing in there that's gripped me, whether it's Mrs. Flood or who's the mom or who was the figure the Doctor saw at the church or what the snow is about. It doesn't matter to me. There's nothing that's compelling me beyond reviewing it here with all of you to carry me over week to week.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit out of order, isn't it, as well? Because some of the episodes have been moved around and they didn't make writing changes in order to allow for that. So it's a bit sort of clunky a little bit. I actually had three sort of mini burning issues. The mystery was okay. The resolution, yeah, not great, but it was okay. I actually had an issue with the fact that there was no opening titles, no Doctor Who music, and for me, as someone who's watched this from childhood up to now and gone back to watched all as many of the classics. Sorry, not watched all of them yet. That introduction with the music, I know exactly what I'm getting and what I'm getting myself into, and I'm on the edge of my seat. Sorry, nearly said something else there. And I just didn't get that. I get why they didn't do the opening titles to set the mood, but
Right.
it wasn't needed. The music alone in itself can actually set the mood without even doing that,
Yeah.
So that was a small one for me. And another small issue that I had was too many unanswered questions and a bit inconsistent in the plot. And this is my biggest issue, though. The plot forgets about the Doctor, so I ended up forgetting about the Doctor, and I shouldn't be forgetting about the Doctor because this is about Doctor Who, and the main star is the Doctor. So why am I forgetting about the Doctor? All we're asking ourselves is, who is that woman? Who is that woman? Whereas in something like Turn Left, yes, it was a Donna-centric episode, but at least we kept getting reminded that the Doctor existed. But in this case, nothing. It
Yeah.
maybe like she returned to the TARDIS once and then didn't return back to the TARDIS until she was like, what, 80? Yeah, no.
And she's sitting there having breakfast in the pub, staring out and focusing on the woman. And then isn't one of the lines at one point she says, "Well, I'll miss him, but oh well. What time's the next train back home?" It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brendan has sent this through. I'm really sorry. I don't know exactly where this was coming in. I think this was the burning issue. So I'm being directed through Twitter right now. So he's saying repeated.
This is the seance sphere today. We're getting messages from beyond.
From beyond.
From Brendan.
Yeah. So please do bear with me. These are Brendan's notes, not mine. So I will do my best. Repeated storyline: is the art of storytelling dead? Church on Ruby Road. Dr. Muse over power of coincidence in Ruby's life. Space Baby, sorry. Her life kept involving children without parents. Harmful to the Doctor, copy and paste approach to the plot. Seems silly, not heroic. Step on something, babies, Susan Twist. I don't know where he was going with that.
The step on something is going around social media this morning, which is the fact that we have 2 episodes in a row now that were caused by the Doctor being totally clumsy, and I think you addressed this too, Rachel, where it's like, he goofs around and steps on the mine, and now he causes the problem because he bumbles into the thing. And the fact that those were 2 back to be bad enough in one season, but the fact that they were back to back, which kind of is to Rachel's point about is this the original order of the shows?
Okay.
I think that's just kind of clumsiness on the part of the production team that they didn't recognize that.
And we had the butterfly as Ken Parker's just pointed out. That's right. Well. So that's 3 things have been stood on, and sort of like I nearly made this a bit of a burning issue, but metaphorically. Stay with me. Metaphorically, the Doctor does rush in and step on things. That's what he does. It just so happens that he's doing it here quite a lot, and that might be because we're in a world where metaphor comes true.
Okay.
Hugh,
welcome back.
Hello.
I tell you what, welcome to the thread. Well done, you 3, the 3 doctors. What the hell were you saying?
I said actually because she was reading off of your messages. I said today this is the seance sphere today.
I just got up to step on something, babies, and Susan Twist, and my head didn't compute what that meant. But then Gary explained it to me because I was reading it, so I didn't. I wasn't processing it. But
Go on, I'll give you a rest because you three have been
Thank you.
fighting like hell. I'll just so hello thread. If the numbers go down now, you don't want me on. it's a bit like 73 yards when actually.
Yeah, everybody, give us your audience appreciation of the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, the audience appreciation figures have gone down now.
Oh, God.
So, well edited together, everybody.
Oh, Brandon's going to chop this last 10 minutes out.
Yeah.
Oh,
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Yeah.
And as Jamie will say in the house, it's been extremely calm here. I could hear the stream, and there's me kind of almost nutting the router, going, "Come on, what's the hell?"
We did our best. in
We
your
tried.
absence.
You did very well. So you've been doing the burning issues. Did you? I was listening to most of it, but the one that it's the Russell Hustle, as I call it. So if I can just kind of remind everybody of what the Russell Hustle was, it's when he kind of always has to crank some sort of message in, and honestly, you just think. I saw a lot of people in Twitter, for example, and I felt the same thing. I liked the Welsh horror. I liked that bit in the pub. And as soon as we left the pub, that's when I had a problem because I thought, why have you done that? Why have you got her on the train? Why have you moved her? It just seemed unnecessary to do that. And obviously it was to do RTD2 of Years and Years 2. It was to do the Emma Thompson right-wing MP again. It was to do, I've got messages about Trump-esque type MPs. You know what I mean? It just, why? You'd establish
his position on his position about the NATO thing, that's not a normal Trump position.
Congress though did pass laws to make it harder to pull out of NATO in preparation for a possible Trump new presidency.
I mean, I was actually, quite honestly, and this is just personal, I wasn't even really offended by that analogy in the episode because, like I said, it was wrong, so I wasn't kind of getting that. I was more the whole, another week, another, anti-God/faith comment in this week. Moffat passed the baton to RTD, who came back with Kate going, well, mankind created God when they saw the sun, which, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, whatever, could the scene have existed without that line? Sure. So why did you need it?
And even if you're going to put it in, there should be some form of pushback given on it from the other point of view, particularly when you've got children watching the show, so that they can critically think, and when they're older, they can make that decision for themselves.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Yes, we don't give us an answer, make us think, okay. You don't want to bring politics into this so heavily, do you? I mean, I don't really want to get into politics now, but
he does, clearly.
He clearly wants to do a right-wing MP again. There he is. He clearly was slagging off Brexiteers again. He was clearly slagging off the Farages of the world. He was clearly slagging off the Trump people in the world. Okay, you can go for that if you want, RTD, if you're allowed. My boss wouldn't allow me to do anything political. I'm amazed you're getting away with it as a public servant. But the thing is, 80 million people voted for Trump. A lot of people voted for Brexit. A lot of people, why are you doing this, RTD? Is it just to have digs? And
because he has the power to do it.
There's another problem, depending on what's in the rest of the episodes, in that we're in an election campaign and whether they are actually allowed.
Yes, well, I agree.
Wait. What do you mean, Hugh? I'm not.
So you will see that we've had an election called in the UK, so for July the 4th. So no significance to that date whatsoever.
No.
But during sort of like election campaigns, broadcasters, particularly public broadcasters like the BBC, have a duty to try and avoid having programming that is obviously political in the sense of being biased. You obviously can have politicians on and they say what they like and they can defend themselves. But if you were to have a program that said, Tories eat babies, then it's not I don't think it'd be allowed. So I think they'll be probably okay. But I would imagine that someone in the BBC is checking that now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got other broadcasters getting into trouble off Ofcom all the time when we've got the BBC is doing something that's clearly having to go at far right, clearly having to go at nationalists, clearly having to go at that.
You're allowed that in normal television, though. We're now in what would be referred to as purdah.
It's purdah, and that's what I mean. The BBC are getting themselves, if the plot had a terrible airline crash and there was a horrible airline crash in real life, they'd take the episode off. They always do. So, this is the etiquette in politics when we're in a general election campaign. But of course, they'll say, oh, well, it's hocus pocus science fiction, so we can get away with it. That's how they'll get round it. But my issue is, the other thing is he's gone for the right ring MP trope, which is when Marty Bridges talked to Ruby and said he's a monster. The implications from that is he's a sex beast.
Yeah.
And
I'm wondering, this is just a bit conspiracy here, but I'm wondering if this was like perfectly timed. I mean, our election wasn't due until next year, right? So they called a snap one after some things had happened, but they still went ahead and did this anyway.
Did they already know the date of your election
No,
back a couple of months ago when they announced the order?
No,
not at all.
So
Not till.
I'm not trying to burst. I'm not trying to burst Rachel's conspiracy.
It wasn't on at all. As Liberal Zardoz points out, purdah doesn't apply at the moment, but that's what I'm saying. It will apply for the next few shows. They were okay to show that because of the timing and it not being dissolved, but they won't. That won't be the case for the shows coming up.
What did you all think while I was in my time, Eddie, like William Hartnell? What did you make? One of my burning issues was the issue that this was the Boom episode done again. It was the same plot.
Oh, yeah.
This time walking into a magic circle, fairy circle. Last time it was walking on a landmine. You're making the hero. I mean, the big argument is that the 15th Doctor should look down when he's talking. Because
and you also brought up the point about Ruby stepping on the butterfly in the first episode. It's like, why are all these episodes about what happens when you step on stuff?
Yeah, I don't. And I was going to add, if I'd been in the stream properly, the coincidence angle was in the church on Ruby Road. So I'm guessing that nothing is done by accident by RTD. He throws in a little moment, and that makes a big thing. I'll mention the TARDIS later when he talks about Wild Blue Yonder. It's in Wild Blue Yonder being left alone, and so there's that. The Albion thing I find interesting. Peter's talking about this. It's way back. It's an ancient word, really. So Albion is a strange word to use, very on the nose. England, Robin of Sherwood, it feels to me. Well, yeah, but it also has a lot of inferences as well. And the Albion Party just gets that nationalist kind of vibe going. When I saw the studio, when Ruby joined that political campaign, that looked like the Brexit Party headquarters when it was 2016. I'll be honest with you. It looked almost exactly the same. So the BBC knew what they were doing. And you could argue that's a little bit naughty, as Rachel was saying, because there was no balance at all. And this is a kids' family show.
Well, Russell's going to push the political stuff as far as he's allowed to.
Gary,
he said that. So.
Yeah, and Gary, it looks as though nobody will dare challenge him, because in one of my saloons, as I showed you in one of the pieces of evidence, he says he wouldn't work with anybody who challenges him.
And I'm gonna wedge this in just as an offhand comment. We're talking about lines that didn't really need to be there. I could have lived the rest of my life without hearing the line in Doctor Who, "I hope you're not having a pee around the back." I would have been just fine for the rest of my days without hearing that line in Doctor Who.
Yeah. There's something happened to RTD when his dialogue and where his thought processes are. We've got bums, methane. We're very toilet, aren't we? We're very toilet.
It's very childlike.
Very immature. And as I've said in nearly every stream now, as a former English teacher, I'm sorry, but RTD, the kids are better than this. They're intelligent. They read. They do actually know better than watching Fungus the Bogeyman, right? Hello. You need to step up your game, mate. You've got easy money at the moment. It's shocking. Absolutely shocking. Do you know what? As a Doctor Who fan, you always wanted to write a script when you were a kid. You wanted to do it. When Andrew Smith did it with Full Circle, you thought, oh, he did it. I want to be able to do it. And we all started writing scripts. I don't know if you all did, but I did. I wrote scripts. Mine was called Crisis on Sapphiron. And the Colin Baker Doctor regenerated in the middle of his cycle on this Galactic Federation planet. It was a very dramatic moment. But anyway, I never got to send it off.
Let's perform that on the show.
Give him the regeneration that he deserves on the show.
There you go. So the point is, you know, we all wanted to be on the program, but I'm sorry, this is substandard stuff. It's lazy. And I suppose, has everyone covered all their contentious items? I don't know. I'm trying to add together.
We mostly did like some couple of plot points. But I still have like a huge list.
It's just the bonding issues. We're not even there, Gary. We'll be covering those for ages.
I think we'll go for Criteria 1 because, as you know, in Criteria 1 is basically whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's recognizable. So just to remind our viewers here, in a shorthand, is it True Who or Boo Who? The safeguarding of Who. Did that look like Doctor Who? Does it feel like Doctor Who? Did the Doctor act like Doctor Who? Sorry, that question's a bit redundant, I know. But that's what we try and do. We try and be objective. We try not to just come in with our own kind of closed agendas. I do try and put the panel on the spot and say, well, no, was that Doctor Who? And I think this is going to be an interesting one. So please join in, because I've seen an awful lot of people online saying that they enjoyed most of it, but it wasn't Doctor Who. And so we can actually say we enjoyed it. But my question is also, is this Doctor Who? Rachel, where would you start on your judging this?
Well, I'm middling as to whether or not it was Doctor Who. So like the recognizable stuff, I put mystery, you know, because they do good mystery, I think, and good puzzles and trying to solve things out. And the time loop and the paradox is also something that's very Doctor Who. However, the unrecognizable stuff is also the time loop, because they did it through once instead of like having it perhaps played through multiple times to show that we're in a bit of a situation here that needs to be gotten out of. And they didn't really put much sort of like puzzle solving into it, I guess you could say. And the other unrecognizable one is a bit of an unusual one, I think, but it was poor cast utilization. And normally Doctor Who, if they've got a stellar cast, if they've got a named people like Sian Phillips, Gemma Redgrave and all of that, they normally utilize them really well. Here that didn't happen.
No, and I think, I mean, I'm going to link what you said with Ken Parker. If Midnight and Turn left are Doctor Who, then this is as well, more so than recent episodes. I wanted to mention Midnight because Midnight was a good cast, wasn't it, for example?
Brilliant cast.
But they used them. They used them really well. Whereas the point you've just made, I agree with, which is, I was so disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing Sian Phillips. That voice, even. I mean, her voice lifted the
we mentioned.
We were talking briefly about the power of voice that she has it. Tom Baker had it.
I also mentioned about like the unanswered questions. So Doctor Who in general is actually very good at clearing up plot points, but this episode I don't think really was long enough to do that. I think it should have been longer, or maybe had a two-parter, perhaps one from Ruby's perspective, one from the Doctor's perspective, or something along those lines. I've got a list of questions here if you would like me to read them.
Well, let's debate some of them, because the thing is, when you mention something as a Doctor Who fan, we can actually say whether we think, you know, like your opinion might be different to Hugh's, might be different to mine and Gary's. So, you know, tell us something about the, you know, whether you thought this was New Who or not, your piece of evidence, and we'll explore it with you, and we'll challenge you or argue the toss, so to speak.
Right, we're not going to fall out, are we?
Well, John Yulden's watching. He's there.
Oh, well, we're still not talking. It's fine. I'm joking. We are talking.
If you watch a Friday stream, John was at one end of my panel, and there's
Okay. Which question should I put? All right. So this one has come from some of my subscribers as well.
Yeah.
So why did Ruby see old Ruby before the Doctor stepped on the fairy circle at the end?
Why?
There's no explanation. It's a time loop which changes, but there's no explanation other than the fact.
There's not going to be any good answers to Rachel's questions or mine. It's just
what I think you have to think is that somehow the Doctor stepping on the circle and disappearing creates the time loop, and the time loop is in existence whenever she somehow goes back, and that's her. Whenever she sees herself the first time in the first loop, that's been created, but this time it's created slightly earlier. But there's not an answer. No, I mean, it's hand waving.
But this it's the chicken and egg thing, isn't it? Because when you do this hocus pocus lark about, oh, that's myself looking at me and warning myself. Okay, nice and clever RTD if you can pull it off. I mean, Stephen Moffat just about did it with Blink. He tried it again with, was it The Angels in Manhattan? It had a sense of Blink, Angels in Manhattan, trying to do Midnight, trying to do Turn Left. The trouble is he's trying to do stuff he's already done. Has he got any new ideas?
And yes, exactly.
The point of the plot I was going to, I mean, I've got my dialogue doctors here, and it was one of the kind of items that Hughes just mentioned here. So if I just bring it up for a moment, there it is. When she was talking to Ruby, she said this timeline might be suspended along your event. So this idea that they walked in, the Doctor was the one who walked into the circle. When I looked up fairy circles, it said that according to that legend, it can disappear you. You go to their realm. So basically, the Doctor could have been the disappeared, or he could have been peripheralized, you know, like the TARDIS is in your perception filter and all that jazz. So basically, the Doctor disappears into the fairy realm, possibly, or she's taken to a different timeline, because Kate Stewart seems to be telling us dead obviously that there's going to be a Whoniverse, because she says this timeline might be suspended along your event, giving us a nice unsubtle RTD hint that there's going to be lots of different timelines going on when you need to get involved.
I actually have another thing to add about this character. Oh gosh, Kate. Sorry, get there in the end. I was going to call her Gemma, but I actually don't think she sounded like Kate.
Yeah.
I was curious what you meant when you said that in your
Rachel, is it because I know what you mean, Rachel, in the incident, but she also, a lot of fans picked up that she doesn't normally say she's Lethbridge anymore. She hasn't done that for ages.
Kate Stewart, isn't it?
Yeah, she's Kate Stewart. So the fact that she said Lethbridge, does this lead to also what you're saying and reinforce your point?
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought, because it was a bit of a bugbear. I was like, why doesn't she sound like she normally does? The writing seemed to be different for it, for sure. And then I theorized that it was just perhaps because she might be in a different timey-wimey timeline that she sounds different. But we are having to come up with explanations because the writing is weak. Yeah, we shouldn't have to be doing that.
No, and the thing is, Paul Richards, as you may know, our criteria one, when we judge it, whether it's Doctor Who or not, it's whether it's well written, well acted, it's all that stuff as well, you know. I mean, Paul Richards, I don't know, because if it's not Doctor Who, if it doesn't join up, if there's no resolution, if the complication isn't dealt with, if it doesn't engage, criteria one definitely, and it does then bleed into criteria three. It is a problem, and I have to say, I saw so many people saying they enjoyed it, but it made no sense. And of course,
Michelle's questions are valid, and Hugh's offered explanation was very good.
Yeah,
but
very good.
Why should we be having to carry the water? Because RTD can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my score for this criteria though was 3. I do actually think it needed a lot of improvement. Like the episode on a whole, I
Yeah.
gave a 5 out of 10. It was okay, wasn't great, but it wasn't, you know, I don't know. But
Well, you
yeah,
see,
I gave it a 3.
yeah. So if everybody's just wondering, because I often sound too teacherish, so I ask people to give grades and everything, but there's the results overall. That 73 yards just pipped Boom. That gets it into what we have got rated as a good category overall. Overall, by the way, we've got lots of gripes and all the rest of it, but you can see there that Devil's Cord and Space Babies are real outliers, but especially Devil's Cord. So all these points accumulate. But yes, we're looking at this criteria one, and we're actually talking about whether that was well written, good Doctor Who, good plot, all the rest of it. And you know, I'm trying to get another bit of dialogue, Doctors up, because he says, I'm not going to tell you what that watcher says to anybody, why they run off. I'm not going to tell you. Let you decide. Now, you can get away with that once or twice, can't you? You can get away with that a little bit, but not all the time, with no explanation at the end of the plot, leaving it to the audience there, leaving that dialogue left to the audience. Before you know it, you just, what is your job? What, just to establish mood? Just to
and
build an atmosphere?
Plus, in addition to that, Brendan, the fact that we saw it first happen with the hiker. Then we saw it with the pub guy.
Yeah.
And then we saw it with Ruby's mom. And at this point, it's like, okay, Russell, we get it. And then it happened again with Unit, like 4 times, which was basically the same thing that we were seeing over and over in different ways. And it's like, okay, we understand that something's happening when people talk to this woman. We don't need to see it 4 times.
Do you find that what RTD's doing with all of his stories, and the reason they don't properly add up is because their job is to do something? So here was the advert for the spin-off. You know, we had the legend, you know, the division between the land and the sea, the notorious, renowned Sea Devils spin-off. And here, Enid, I think that's the Sian Phillips character, isn't it? The cliff tops are a boundary between the land and the sea, a liminal place, neither here nor there, where rules are suspended. And Kate Lethbridge Stewart also said that Unit at the moment seemed to be having to do an awful lot of supernatural pickups.
My pushback on this, Brendan, would be the fact that yes, everybody in terms of what is the audience then supposed to walk away with after a scene? The problem with this quote that you have up, not that you have it up, but just the problem with RTD assuming that this quote would answer everything, is because right after that, they took the kind of Mickey out of that whole scene when the delivery guy shows up, and it became a massive practical joke on Ruby, which means that if I'm an audience member, I'm assuming that all of the kind of guff that they were talking about before was part of this joke, and it doesn't really mean anything. Yes. So Russell can't have it 2 ways in terms of having that be the resolution of the scene and then yet hanging all of his story explanation on that. It doesn't track.
But are you finding that when we did Wild Blue Yonder, he said we're on the fringes of the end of the universe, so that's where things go a bit weird, and that's why he shouldn't have played with the salt, and that's opened it all up. Now he's talking about the boundary between the land and the sea. I mean, honestly, he seems to be saying that everything's fracturing for the sake of his easy writing. I mean, this is too easy, that everything's just in flux. I thought we'd had enough of flux with Chris Chibnall.
So, and then the last thing I'll say on this is that, so basically then, Brendan, it seems to me then, is RTD assuming that we need to remember key lines from every single episode and put them together ourselves in order to kind of figure out what he's doing?
Well, he is. Let me just remind you, he did think that this is one of the greatest things he's ever written. So can we appreciate this? I sat here and I watched episode 4 last night, and I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever made in my life. So I'm very, very happy with it. Now, judging that on criteria 1 and criteria 3, then therefore he's storming it. Now, I've heard Rachel's results, and she doesn't agree with Russell Davies. You're both not seeing the same thing.
Oh, I will let Hugh go. I've been kind of talking too much. I want to hear Hugh's opinion about.
I gave it a good, whatever that works out is, whether 7 or 8 you want to go with, Brendan.
Yeah.
Now, does it feel like a standard Doctor Who? Not completely, but standard Doctor Who is a lot of experimentation in it. Given the fact that we had the Celestial Toymaker come back, the Celestial Toymaker, it was a huge amount of experimentation in the 60s. It's just something that's repeated. This whole story bit, and I think sort of to pick up on what Gary's saying about the lines, which you have to remember, I think there is an awful lot which has to be remembered and assumed here, and it's meant to have this huge payoff. I'm giving it some possibility at the moment that it is. I think what has happened is that after Russell's run as showrunner, where story arcs were not story arcs, they were random references, he saw what Moffat did, particularly in the first 2 series of Moffat, where you had this type of arc which went through 2 series, and he's gone, I can do that as well. I'm unconvinced. I didn't think Stephen Moffat pulled it off. And I think it needed too much attention paid to what was going on. Silence will fall, and meaning different things over the different episodes. I think we're back at that type of thing. I think there are. I give Last Night a pass in general on some of the resolution, in the hope that it will be resolved at some later point, because that's part of it. I do think the main problem is that thing about, we don't know. There's no reason why it would make all of those people run away. It also, one thing that really annoyed me, given the fact that so much has been made of the strength of Ruby's family, her adopted family, and so much was made in Boom about the power of love. We just threw that out the window last night.
Yeah, and I was saying before we started, wasn't I, that I'm obsessed with the dialogue and certain bits, and I find it so, it's so easy to spot loopholes like Rachel has with the plot, although she's done a damn good job of the number. But it's also easy to actually spot with the progressives that they 1 minute they're virtue signaling, be careful with your use of pronouns in Star Beast and various places. Okay, not going to get into an argument yet, but okay, that's
one other thing
he had Cherry Sunday, didn't he, saying that, somebody like the Doctor is a nutcase. Now, I didn't think that language was acceptable either. And coming from a virtue signaling progressive lefty like RTD, that's shock horror. That's cancellation behavior. Disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. Don't tell me that saying he or she is, dead naming people and really go heavy on that, if you equally are going to call people nutcases. That's absolutely unbelievable. What were you going to say, Gary?
No, I was just going to say that I'm looking at your graphics that you're putting up, and just like we mentioned a couple weeks ago, that in Devil's Cord there was a good story to be had about a good Doctor Who story to be had about what happens to a world, not necessarily Earth, but a world when music is removed. That's a good concept for a Doctor Who story. And just here, if they would have stuck with the whole, what's going on the cliff tops of Wales? Is there this division between worlds and it's causing something to happen, and just stuck it in Wales with that story? That's a great Doctor Who story to be had. But they just rattle off the line and then they move on to something else. And it's sad because there's good concepts in here. They're just not used.
And as Rachel said while she was in silent mode, but she wasn't silent because she was in the thread and she asked that question, there it is. Why does Russell Davies think this is one of the best things he's ever written in a non-Doctor-centric episode? And as I said, I think in my intro, isn't this alarming that he doesn't seem to know now what makes a good Doctor Who story with the Doctor in it? And that, it held together for a while. I personally think my engagement checked out once she got on the train and we went into the political sphere. I thought I have to say, look, I am one of the not we's. I haven't written a script. I haven't got on the theatre or anything. RTD's award winning. Surely, when you build tension and mood, you don't then kill it.
I agree with you.
I agree.
mean, that was my point. That was Brendan. That was my exact checkout point too. When she got on the train, and even when she was on the train and seeing the figure, it was like the change in tone and mood was just kind of like, you know, you're moody in a dark room and somebody flipped on the light switch. That's kind of the effect that it had on me. It just dissipates, you know, to use, as the 11th Doctor would say, like breath on a mirror. You know, all the atmosphere just kind of vanished. I do want to say that there were 3 things I really liked in this episode, Millie Gibson aside, who I think did okay. I loved Sean Phillips, even though she was wasted was not in it nearly enough. I like the fact that we didn't get a pronoun call out. That was thank you. And the bendy tree. I loved the bendy tree for some reason. I thought
Do you know, I don't think I mentioned this in my video yesterday, but I was thinking about it today. The setting for this and the premise of this, and like the cinematography in many respects reminded me to that of the Ring, the American version of The Ring.
Yeah.
Like tonally, that's what it reminded me of, like mystery thriller. There's the weeping whatever tree it's called. That's what it reminded me of. It also reminded me of something else, which I'll say later. But yeah, it reminded me of that. And they shouldn't have moved it away. I did switch off when they moved it away, and it just sort of lost all of that. I think they should have gone with more horror, but it just definitely lost that.
But you see, a lot of the thread are also saying, while we've been on the progressive front, was he anti-Welsh or anti-Welsh clique or anti-nationalist clearly? The joke on the Welsh, the pub goers all having a laugh at Millie, and then the next minute, you know, and then of course the other non-progressive language was calling that lad a fairy. I'm absolutely stunned that we're playing around with this. Just like you said, Rachel, let people make a decision. Don't lead them one way or the other. But while he's lecturing us on certain things that are really not acceptable, he's then showing in pub life people being called a fairy, I assume, because of his sexuality. I'm assuming that because the trope was he had blue hair and he had nose studs and everything. So that must mean he's gay. You know what I mean? That's the trope, isn't it?
And didn't Sean Phillips call Ruby racist?
Yeah,
as a joke, I think, effectively.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is part of the problem with some of that. So I would have been more worried about the train if there hadn't been those constant tonal shifts in the pub and the constant undercutting of them. So I was less bothered about that, and I was quite glad in some ways that we'd moved out of the pub, because it wasn't. We'd already got the fact that the ghost came along. I'd be interested to see what the other reference Rachel thinks it is visually, because I've got one that I thought it was, but I'll come to that whenever Rachel comes to her other one as well.
No.
I just thought tonally it tries. It's not as tightly written as he thinks it is.
And while I was in and out of the
tree, there's the tree.
Yeah, there's a tree. When I was in and out of the thread on burning issues, one of the other burning issues on behalf of John Daly, and I know a couple of you, if it's not been said big time, if I've said it, if you've said it, please. So, is where's the money being spent? And when you saw Unleashed, it was fascinating that for a 20-second scene, they booked a few train carriages, and they had to get the whole scene filmed and all. It seems to me that, yes, they do have money, but unlike the old days when Classic Who would have built a set for a train carriage with a window and just got the scene done and put the money somewhere else, we now hire out a train carriage.
Yeah, I figured it was a real train.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that.
And really, look, I'm not being picky, but, you know, the money, people are saying, where's the money being spent? And I think some money was probably wasted there big time, because that won't have been cheap. To have a film crew in one of the train carriages, and then hire out a second train carriage. And for one journey, you've got to get all the filming done. But basically, it was just so she looked out the window and could see the Watcher now and again,
Well,
wasn't it?
that sort of thing
Disney
is
can
pricey
afford it.
too. That sort of thing is pricey too. The last filming thing that I did, and this was pre-lockdown, where they brought me to London, they paid last-minute ticket at nearly £400 for a return.
Wow.
Yeah, so they will pay to get you there, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They will pay the money. It's just, it's notoriously expensive.
I'm getting the impression now with Bad Wolf and the Disney money and everything that it's not money no object, but they're starting to act like the Ministry of Defence, that they won't actually get 3 bids. They'll just pay. And before you know it, we're paying more for our military than Poland are, and they've got more soldiers. And you start to see that people aren't making the right decisions. And I just wonder whether Bad Wolf and all them are just silly money now. And it's like, oh, we could have a train carriage scene.
Yeah.
Rather than cutting costs and putting the money elsewhere. I just think it's a damn good example of
Disney's writing the check.
They certainly are. And think about it, you've got, how many camera angles did they do on that one? Not many, I would have thought. But if you've got multiple camera angles, that is one setup, and then you take it all down and you have to do another setup. And sometimes those setups can take a really long time to do. And then you have a camera rehearsal. You have your own rehearsal, obviously, on top of that. And then if you do this take, you do that take, and then you listen to the director, you do it again, and then you could end up doing like 16 takes. This could all go towards, where was she going? London, Paddington, and then we have to start again because we're on the train journey. It's madness.
The one. The prior picture to this that you had up, Brendan, I thought this is not directly related to what we're talking about in the moment, but this was another funny point that I had. It pulled me out of the show because I thought, okay, Ruby already knows there's something potentially traumatizing about people talking to this woman. She already saw the effect she had on the hiker. So she just sends the pub guy out there, and then later she sends her mom out to go see her. And I thought, she's like a scientist pulling the wings off a fly to see what the effect is. It's like, who's the latest victim I can send out to test this thing out?
I think that's slightly unfair in terms of her mother, who was obviously going, I'm going to talk to the woman because it's the only way of solving it. So that's reasonable for her mother to go and do that. I'm slightly amazed about the fact that Ruby appeared to go out. Her mother must have been watching, who then nipped in and managed to change the locks. And Ruby didn't just wait for her. And she got how on earth do you get a sort of like a stalking directive against your adoptive daughter with no evidence?
Okay, so I'm gonna race through these. None of them really beg an answer because I don't think there are answers, but it goes to the topic we're talking about right now, which is the level of storytelling, which I think was atrocious. The responsibilities that a storyteller has to the audience, and I just thought this was
Gary, I'm not interrupting you to stop your flow necessarily, but just with Arnott Hill twice now, and good to see you. He's saying I'm being picky. I assume he's going to find we've been very picky about Criteria 1. So just to address that, we could be picky if we were just picking on tiny points, wouldn't we, Gary? But we do judge it on the engagement. So Criteria 3 will be, was it just entertaining? Was it bums on seats? Were we, as John Daly says, were we leaning forward? And we'll come to that. So Arnott Hill, we might pick on a bit of dialogue we don't like, blah, blah, blah. But we do look at the whole thing in the round too. Sorry, Gary.
Right. No, not at all. No, because that's a fair point. If you're talking about, well, that piece of dialogue didn't make sense, or, but I can only go by my view, whether or not they're shared by anybody else. When at multiple points in the episode of any show that I'm watching, where I'm pulled out of it and I'm constantly going, wait a minute, all the time, over like stuff that's not just like minor niggles. You can go, well, maybe there was a production glitch or something like that. So no, that's a valid point, but let me just kind of run through these. I'm not expecting answers. These were just the questions that popped up in my mind throughout the course of the episode. Why did the doctor disappear? Don't know. If the doctor vanished, why didn't the TARDIS? Don't know. People have asked, why couldn't Ruby access the TARDIS? Don't know. Why the 73 yards distance exactly? Don't know. Why do people run screaming after talking to the figure who's apparently, later in the episode, just an old woman? Don't know. Why doesn't Ruby run after the hiker to find out what the old woman said or just to check on whether the hiker's okay? Don't know. What were those sign language motions that old Ruby was doing when she was appearing everywhere? Don't know. How did Ruby know how to contact Kate? Don't know. As Kate says, why did she wait a year to do it? Don't know. Why did Kate and the troops just leave like that? Surely based on Kate's reaction, she would have detained Ruby for questioning. Don't know. Why, as Hugh just asked, why did Ruby's mom cast her off with no contact? Don't know. Why were the security guards on the field about to gun down a young woman holding up a phone half a football field away, but no one thought to do the same thing for the unidentified woman standing right next to Gwilliam? Don't know. What did old Ruby say to Gwilliam on the stage to make him resign? Don't know. What happened in the hospital room at the end to send old Ruby back to the start of the loop? Don't know. And why in the room could the 73 yards distance suddenly be broken? Don't know. How and why was the time loop created if the legend was played off as just a practical joke in the pub? Don't know. How and why did the time loop get broken at the end? Don't know. If the TARDIS has a perception filter, why were there all kinds of remembrances left around it, clearly indicating that people could see it? Don't know. And if people could see it, why hadn't UNIT detected it and come to confiscate it? Don't know. And why did old Ruby, just as was asked before, why did old Ruby just vanish from the clifftop field at the end? Don't know. And the last one, if Ruby didn't remember the events of the time loop, how did she know to tell the doctor not to step in the circle? Don't know. None of these to me are niggling points. They go to the core of the plot as RTD had set it up.
So Gary, apart from that,
can I
you
say,
like
I think those were damning apart from the last one. I think it's not that she knows, it's just that she goes, oh, look, there's a thing. I don't think she's not. It's not, not that it's disappearing,
Fair enough.
but everything else, absolutely.
Fair enough.
With
Yeah, I
the
mean,
70, sorry, Brendan.
No, go on. What were you going to say?
With the getting closer in the football pitch, with the 73 yards, like, because it was pretty consistent. It was 73 yards apart all the time, right up into that point, right? I figured that she's supposed to be about 40 then. I figured that maybe as she got older, she could get closer. But then that's sort of that's what I thought at first. But then later you see it 73 yards again, right?
Yeah. So what's happening there is the old Ruby or Ghost Ruby or whatever Ruby isn't next to Gwilliam until she's 73 yards away.
Yeah.
So she's walking back to get 73 yards away from Gwilliam in order for Ghost Ruby to appear.
But of course, when we're saying, is this Doctor Who on criteria one, number one, yet again, the Doctor doesn't solve anything. It's the companion.
Who doesn't solve anything either, really.
No. Although she said, I'm here to save the world. Remember, she said, I know what I'm here. Yeah. The drama again. And as Liberal Zardoz is saying here, they should have kept it in Wales. And the other reason for that, Liberal Zardoz, is because classic Doctor Who would have android invasion, image of the Fendal, you're stuck in a village, siege mentality. Doctor Who does that well. You can do it with better budgets, you can do it with, better effects. But to be honest, I think RTD was half there when he kept it in the village or in the pub and they're under siege. I think it was you said you couldn't just sustain that for the whole episode, though, probably. But to then move the locale, and then the double problem, Rachel, is to change the time zone. She's 5 years older, 10. You kill, don't you, the tension there. I mean, I'm not an expert like you on theatre, but the unity of time, the unity of place, the unity of setting, the Greek unities, they do help. And of course, I love teaching Inspector Calls where you are in the moment all the way through. Whereas in this one, 5 years later, 10 years later, Now
Mm.
she's an old lady. Now we've changed setting. You're killing any momentum or tension completely.
Yeah, you do. And I think, well, with this one, she's what, 18, 28. She's about 20 when she first starts out. This all happens. And then as she gets older, instead of actually casting perhaps a middle-aged actress to take over and do it,
Mm.
they put her in a really ill-fitting wig, get her to do that. And it's not until the character's an old lady do they actually
Yeah.
switch out actresses. And it's like, well, you need to show that time happen properly, because you can do that, but you chose only to age up an 18-year-old, which theoretically in play and age standards would that happen? I suppose it can happen, but it's not realistic enough to happen.
How old is Millie Gibson? Is she 18?
She was
18.
when she filmed this, I believe.
Okay.
It was a hell of a risk, and I'll give her plaudits
One.
because, as you
Yeah.
know, and I'm showing you the guys here. I wanted to bring Gary in because one of your criticisms about this, which I thought was fair, and it was more for criteria too, but we might as well bring it in because it's what Rachel's been talking about. Is as she aged, you felt it wasn't done too well, did you?
Well, and again, props to Millie Gibson, who I think that given the responsibility for carrying this episode, I think in that sense, I think she did a good job. I don't think she can be knocked given what she was being asked to do.
Yeah.
All fair play to that. That aside, I have to say that I didn't buy for a single second that she had aged 15 to 20 years, because I know the birthday cards went from 25 to 30 to 40. So at least 15 years, possibly more, since she looked, sounded, and acted the exact same as her present day self. Given the bad wig that I actually didn't, notice until Rachel mentioned it in her video, I thought, oh yeah, that was a bad wig. I was just noticing the glasses because I was thinking giving a young girl glasses will not make them look 20 plus years, older. I also noted that even at age 30 and 40, she's still dating guys that look like they're in their early to mid 20s, which when she was supposedly 40 looked weird. And the last thing in regard to this, everything from now to 2049, before the 20-year jump, because I was trying to keep track of the actual dates, everything up to 2049 looked exactly like 2024. There was nothing in any of the settings or anything there were which would indicate that it was anything other than 2024. Now, I know things are not going to change. We're not talking hundreds of years of change, but if you go out in the world, things look different from the way they looked in 1999 in some ways. And so I'm thinking by the time you get to 2049, there's going to be some things you notice in the background, even if you can't explain it, that look
but also, Gary,
different.
The other thing, I agree with that, but I also thought plot-wise, the character Ruby has had this watcher with her for years and years and years and years. So when she's with a fella who she clearly fancies in a bar or restaurant, she can't take her eyes off the watcher. I mean, I do think you would have got used to it by that point, because even when she's an old lady, she can fall asleep and she can then say, oh, I've never been alone. I've had somebody with me for 65 years. You will get used to this. So
it'll be white noise after a while in real life.
So it didn't seem right to me. It was another cheap kind of bit of slapstick to me that, all her dates went wrong because she kept looking out the window type thing. I thought, oh, please. Go on, Rachel.
Can I just say something about my experience with having to play an older character?
Ooh.
I have had to do it. Sorry, I'm just adjusting. Sorry, I just kicked my bin over.
That's her playing an older character, right?
Yeah,
that's me playing an older character.
The lines,
no. So I remember when I was. This was going back a few years ago now, not that long ago actually, and I was cast as one character in this performance piece, and the age range of the cast was predominantly. A lot of it was quite young, but there were a handful of older people, and I was approached by one of the producers and they said, look, can you play also play this character, be the understudy for it. Okay, understudying is blooming hard. And I said, oh, really? Are you sure? And I'm like, this character's like 50. And the one thing that that was commented on, and this is where they sort of downfall with Ruby and Amy in this case, was the fact that because I was the older of the younger people, so to speak, I would have more experience, more life experience, more understanding of how perhaps an older person would actually present themselves. So therefore, I would actually be more suitable. Now, it felt very strange, very uncomfortable, and I was told by a couple of people that I could do with some wrinkles with my grey wig. But it was hard to do. So I think it's like if it's that hard for me, and I would have been 36 at the time. I'm a lot older than what I appear to be. If it's that hard for me to play a 50-year-old, then it's going to be notoriously hard for an 18-year-old to play a 40-year-old, which is an even bigger age gap, I would imagine, particularly in maturity.
And what I had flashed up then earlier was her Instagram page, and she said this is her first filming for Doctor Who. And so she hadn't even had time. You know, every doctor, Rachel, every doctor, they normally say, well, Kinder may be, sorry, it was Fall to Doomsday was your first story, Peter Davison, so you warm up, but it's never your first story. They try and do that, don't they? Whereas for poor Millie Gibson, yes, the first story shown is not the one that she first started, but my God, with all the challenges you've just said, it was a hell of a start for an 18-year-old girl. Yes,
Well,
there may be
exactly.
but this is what shocked me, because as you know, all the fans are saying, why have we got a Dr. Light episode in an 8-episode season? And of course, when you watch Unleashed, they explain that he was still working for sex education. So they had, but then you think, why did they actually therefore structure the filming when you don't have your male lead actor? You know, surely why are you doing that? And why don't you just start the filming when the person you need is available?
I've come across that situation before in this industry where an actor's been contractually bound by something else, which was prior to signing this contract for something, and what happens is you're bound by that contract to go and complete it regardless of whether or not, so that the upcoming schedule has to work around the schedule that's already been set out. You have no choice but to complete it. It's a bit sort of wishy-washy. I don't like working like that because you can get into a mess and a bit of hot water, but it's just that's what happens. It doesn't matter.
I'm really curious. I want to ask Rachel after listening to what she was just saying, and I want to say again, my observations had nothing to do with Millie's ability or her performance in this episode, which I credit. I think given this script, I think she was fine.
She was brilliant.
But I want to ask Rachel now, let's say that you were in charge of, like, you know, prepping, you know, the look or her demeanor or whatever, or being her kind of like aging coach, you know, in this. What would you have done, or how would you have advised her in terms of her look or anything like that to kind of maybe make that going from 18 to 40 and all those scenes a little bit more feel better? What would you have done if you'd been in charge of it?
It would have been exceptionally difficult in order to actually coax that out, because she was 18 at the time, so she would have still been playing potentially roles of a 13-year-old and a 23-year-old. That would be her playing age, 18 to 20, 13 to 23. It would be sit down, speak to older people. Actually, in actual fact, a good thing to have done would have been, and this is what happened between Kate Winslet and the actress who played Older Rose. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. They sat down and they talked about life experiences. And what I would have done was I would have got the older Ruby and sat her down with younger Ruby and get them to swap stories, get them to talk about the character, and actually have the older actress tell her how to approach it as a younger actress coming into an older role. You can do that. And then also you can method it as well and ask those questions and do it that way. And perhaps take some additional acting classes in addition to that. That doesn't mean to say her acting was bad, because actually there's only one bit that I thought that she didn't connect to, and that was actually near the beginning. So yeah, I would have got her to analyze it in great detail, sit down, talk to an older person, ask those questions, did a bit of research, applied that knowledge, and like holding yourself differently, and what can you do with it within your body in order to connect an older person, because as we get older we all hold ourselves very differently, right? So
And I think it's not just about holding, and this possibly relates back to the writing. I don't think the character was written as being 40.
no,
And I
it was
think that gave her real problems in terms of how you approach that. Because what I don't think what Russell didn't do is sit down and say, if Ruby Sunday was 18 and the Doctor disappeared like that,
yeah
and she spent 22 years with a shadowy figure 73 yards away and had relationships and had her mother throw her out and had Unit go mental, then I probably shouldn't say go mental. You'll get me into trouble, Brendan. But
no case is allowed.
But go nutcase. Then there wasn't something writing about how that would have changed her. She appeared as a character written much the same.
Yeah, and she didn't have a lot to say as older Ruby.
She wasn't. This is what I mean. Once he moved it from the village setup, there were short scenes, weren't there? Like little cameo scenes.
Mm-hmm.
When she was 25 years old, she had a couple of moments looking out of a window and stuff, and then we jump again. She wasn't exactly given meaty dialogue, was she? I mean, I bet if Sian Phillips had a chat with him with her in the cafeteria, she would have thought, "God love, but this is not I, Claudius."
One of the best things that an actor can do is sit down and talk to the older generation of actors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the aging process. Derek Jacobi was pretty young. He wasn't 18, but he had to age quite a lot for I, Claudius, actually, didn't he? Which again,
you know what I kept thinking about, Brendan? I know we're going to move on, but I kept thinking about during the show, the Next Generation episode, The Inner Light, where Picard is in that world and he lives the whole lifetime in like 10 minutes. And you believe as he gets the family and then the loss of them. And then at the end, when he comes out and you can feel that he feels it. I mean, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as we move on to talking about another facet, I mean, I was trying to help certain people who think we might be just niggling away. Oh, we're not. Can anyone recommend the best episode of Classic Who? On Wednesdays, we did it on Friday this week because of power cuts. Ironic, because it happened again. But basically, we do have a more light, fun, nostalgic show. So MCTV, you might find that on Wednesdays, we will be trying to talk about those. So last week it was the best part 3s in Classic.
Yeah, that was great.
And it was the demons. And so just a quick advert for Wednesday, everybody, 7 p.m. on Wednesday.
No fair, Rachel, no fair.
So there's a little advert for Wednesday. We go through nostalgia. We look at where we are in the week. It's very midweek. What was behind us? What's ahead of us? We're halfway through the season. And so that question, I can see the thread saying Robots of Death, Inferno, Enlightenment, Talons of Wen Chian, Remembrance of the Daleks. Yes, yes. I mean, it's a hard one to say which is the best.
I told him it was a 20-way tie. for
But just to remind you, everybody, if you've discovered us, please subscribe. Click on the notifications so you know when I'm dropping another program. I'm dropping another program tomorrow, for example, and it's one of my panelists he's decided to walk away from new Doctor Who. And he has watched all of Jodie, all of Chibnall. He's watched everything. He's not one of those who walks away in a huff. He has seen it all the way through. So look out, switch on those notifications, because tomorrow I've had a good chit chat with him as a good colleague, and he's explaining his reasons why he's turning his back on new Doctor Who. And he's disappointed. He's really disappointed. And so please have a look at that tomorrow, because I thought it would be a nice, interesting show to hear somebody's reasons. Somebody's watched all of them. He goes way back to his very first episode he watched was Spearhead from Space, he said. And so he's gone from 1970 to 2024, and now he's out.
Earlier in the show, Brandon, I was wondering if that was you. I thought, wait, did Brandon just turn his back on new Doctor Who and he jumped? But no, we're glad you came back.
No, I turned my back on the stream. That's what I did. Just to kind of, for a bit of levity for a moment, though, I was going to ask you, is there any award or gong you're going to offer to anybody? Because we often have our Razalon Award for best something in front of the camera or behind. Is there anything in that production where you thought, no, there needs to be a good shout out there? Rachel?
I know we've already done it. And whilst I said there was one bit that I felt like she didn't connect with, I'm going to say Millie, because she took a show, held it up on her own with no shooting, no doctor. And yes, okay, the story wasn't the best story, but the story was okay. And I just think she did really well. And I think she would really suit that kind of mystery thriller storytelling. So mine goes for Millie for carrying the show.
And Melanie Weston Investigates, who obviously you've been chatting to each other. I think she follows you now, and I think you follow her. And I follow her as well. And she's got some very interesting points. Please have a look at Melanie Weston Investigates. She also has given it to Millie. Hugh, you don't have to, but is there anything?
No, I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I think that given that it's hard enough to do the show if you are an experienced actor in doing that type of thing. And yes, she's got a lot of experience, but Doctor Who's bigger in terms of the concentration. For her to do that as the first show and carry it through and be mostly convincing, and say, I think most of the problem with her aging was the writing and perhaps the direction in some of it. So, yeah, absolutely. I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Okay, Gary is one.
Yeah, I third that. I think that this episode would have, even with all the other problems we've been discussing, really would have risen and fallen based on her talent. If she hadn't been up for doing this, no amount of audience giving RTD grace would have helped. So and it boggles my mind that I didn't know until just a while ago that this was the first filmed episode. That makes me credit her even more.
Yeah, I've got it here. I know it's hard to read, but she actually says here, 73 Yards was the very first script I read for our series of Doctor Who. I remember closing it and rereading it again straight away. It was such a special place in my heart. I didn't know Ruby. I didn't know what a story was going to entail, and I didn't know anyone at Doctor Who either. During filming this episode, I experienced everything for the first time that Ruby was experiencing too. I grew and learned so much as an actress and as a person. So, yeah,
she deserves whatever post-Who success she's going to move on to.
Yeah. She will as well, I think.
So, my next question, of course, then is, while we're handing out any awards, is there a chameleon award for appalling, something embarrassing, something in front of the camera or behind the camera again? Any input where you thought that was just bad? That was embarrassingly bad. You see, for example, I'll give an example. The set in Time Lash, and it's something we all laugh about. John, I know you're in the thread. That's your dating Joker, isn't it? He plays his Joker. He goes and dates somebody and shows time lash. He said. So in time lash, the set design, we all know when they go, when they climb into that kind of vortex, and it's terrible. So I'd have handed the Chameleon Award to the set and also the actor playing H.G. Wells as well. Anyway, so has anyone got any Chameleon Awards they want to hand out?
So I think that we've got lots of problems with the script, and I think those are well done. I think the Chameleon Award goes to Russell Davies for saying he's not going to explain about what's said, because that undermines the entirety of the episode and makes it worthless.
Yeah.
Again, Melanie Weston investigates for the plot holes, but she's on the same. It's Russell Davies who's been given her the award. Rachel, was that a yes?
Yeah, that's a conclusive yes for me. I agree with you.
Now, John Yulden is telling us, before I get to Gary, this is how this is his audition process when he's inviting a lass on a date. If he shows time lash, it tests whether they are genuine or not. Well, genuine, what do you mean? As in a genuine Doctor Who fan or a genuine woman? You're not a woman if you don't like time lash. There you go.
I like time lash.
I'm shaking my finger at John. Shame on you for doing that, John.
Gary, have you got anything to award?
No, I mean, I can't. Already it's been said. I absolutely am right up there with you and Rachel. That is an appalling but not at all surprising complete abrogation of his writing responsibility. And to me, you know what that tells me? That tells me that he knows it's substandard and he's trying to shift. I'm serious. He's trying to shift the blame and the responsibility onto the audience and saying, oh, not only is it your responsibility to fill in all the holes I've left, but if you don't like it, it's because he's telling the audience, if you think it's substandard, it's because you haven't done your job in filling out the holes and bringing your own imagination. And it's like, Russell, get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like that. I mean,
and as Liberal Zardoz said, because we've got different versions here, this could easily have been reworked into a nice, tight 6-part miniseries focused on Millie Gibson trapped in that little village.
Yes.
And they've gone, me, those who watch me, episodic TV, Doctor Who should still be doing it. Crimpling, though, says the award for the Chameleon War goes to Shooty's costume, which was appallingly bad.
Fisherman Doctor.
It looked good on Sarah Jane, not so much on Shooty.
Yeah, look, some of the outfits are working, some of them aren't, but that one did look. It was making. I don't know. He doesn't look serious. He doesn't look as though he's a bloke. It just doesn't look right. It's just all wrong. I agree with you, Crimpline, on that one. Maybe I have to hand out a few awards on that one. So, let's talk about our engagement, because engagement is a big one. It always is on our judgment scoring, which is, were you sat there thinking, brilliant TV, that had me from start to finish, as I normally say. So as an audience member, were you engaged? Please say so in the thread. Did you enjoy that? Were you happy with the plot and the resolution? Was it good story writing? Now, we're not going to repeat what we've said about plot holes and that, because clearly this is going to make it maybe problematic. But I think it is possible to say you enjoyed it, given even all those plot holes. Sometimes you can be carried by a performance, by something else. So it's still to play for, really. So Hugh, on your engagement, I've got written down here that you've really scored this big, haven't you?
Yeah, I've given this an outstanding. I maybe my expectations are incredibly low, but I've been so used to this goes from the specials of looking at the television saying, oh, how are they going to tie this up in 5 minutes, and realizing that only 20 minutes is gone and there's another half hour of stuff to suffer. I looked at this and something that one of the reasons I was talking earlier about it moving at 30 minutes outside the village was I thought this is quite tight, and it was quite tight. I thought that there's quite a lot packed in there. I really enjoyed the process. I spent a lot of time going, I will ignore the problem of what Ghost Ruby is saying, because I presume we will get that at some later stage, not this. Obviously not, Russell. Thanks very much for that. But yeah, so within that, I thought that this is really good. I'm watching this; it's all fine. I've got a lot of plot holes. I'm not really that bothered about them. Whenever we had the discussion about Terror of the Zygons, which I think is another possibility for one of the greatest series, it's got lots of plot holes, but it doesn't matter because it just rolls along, and it's done well, and it's got all of the meaning. So. Yeah, maybe I'm just suffering from low expectations, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. It was interesting. I thought, as we already covered, Millie Gibson was good, and had there been an actual payoff in terms of what was being said, then I will keep my outstanding. But Russell, having said that, just takes everything away as far as I'm concerned.
So before I bring Gary in, Matthew Pounder says it was stylish, but it didn't stand up to scrutiny. And this is the point, isn't it? I was sat there engaged more than the other 3 episodes for longer. It did. We said, me and Gary, the checking out point, but I was with it for longer. But I'd seen the politics done before in years and years, so it was just the same again. So yes, and it did look well. I mean, we haven't discussed Criteria 2 specifically, although we've referenced it in various places. But you know, the cliff top stuff, the mood and atmosphere was great. Just before I come to Gary, Liberal Zardoz, 7 slipping down to a 4 at the end. It's hard to judge, isn't it? Because I split the episode into 3 parts. The horror I loved, the politics was like, and then the end, well, what happened? So basically it kept slipping all the way. So it was very hard to just kind of pin a blooming number on it. So Gary, what's your judgment on your engagement of it overall?
You're going to do this to me. You're going to do this to me, Brendan, putting me after Hugh's very eloquent defense and explanation of his
if I explain
own
to the
engagement.
audience,
You're going to put me on after that.
if I explain to the audience as you come in,
because
sorry,
Brendan
Gary,
knows what I
Brendan
already knows what I put my score for the audience engagement, which was a 1/4 of a point.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that, as we've already, so I'm not going to reiterate what we've already talked about. I honestly was engaged for the episode for about the 10 minutes. With the train scene, I checked out because all the mood kind of vanished, and it became kind of like watching like a soap opera after that point, with the kind of the settings and all of that. There was no resolution. The episode stopped. It didn't resolve. So, and basically because I think that RTD is leaning into, he's writing fantasy. This is not science fiction anymore. It's fantasy. And with fantasy, anything goes. There's no obligation to resolve anything because, hey, it's fantasy. You know, apply your own rules and kind of basically telling the audience, write your own story, you know, for the stuff you didn't find. But I will conclude with one question. I've been curious, would any casual viewer or a viewer coming into this show for the first time through this episode, because Russell T Davies has said he's structuring it to where anybody can start with any episode and they'll be absolutely fine. He said that. Would any viewer coming into this show for the first time have been remotely satisfying with the storytelling in this episode and how it resolved? I don't think so.
No. And this is the other problem. I mean, I was flicking up there for a second that even the dialogue, he thought it was a neat trick, I dare say, that at the beginning when they landed, and he was extremely excited to be in Wales. Just like I said, I was find that quite a remarkable. She said she'd been there twice. And then by the end of the episode, she said she'd been there 3 times, and we could see this bookending cleverness. Wow. And of course, she had to think, didn't she, at the end of the episode, why she said 3 times, and then she said, I think the 3rd time's now. And you've got, oh wow, he's pulled it all together. And I could see his clevernesses, because when I watched him do the gay drama Cucumber, there was the death of one of the characters who was on a date, and it was brutal. Absolutely brutal. And the whole episode built to his death. You know, dramas do this now, but RTD did it pretty well, where basically he'd watched the Eurovision Song Contest. There was a bit of that. Basically, everything that we saw in the whole drama, by the end when he was murdered and he died over about 50 seconds, you saw all his life. And it was horrible. It was actually good drama, but brutal. And I could see him doing the same trick here, where basically, as you know, when the kind of watcher at the hospital bed caught up with old Ruby and then they kind of joined, you kind of saw basically lots of the episode all kind of come together, like, hey, clever. And you think, oh, dear, not again. Same old tricks.
Just to say, one thing that whenever everyone kept on running away, the thing that kept on going through my head was Monty Python's Funniest Joke in the World, where if you hear it, you die. Which possibly not what I was meant to be thinking.
I mean, this. I know. I'm disappointed. I am disappointed because I was enjoying it.
But see, there was the running, and this is to Hugh's point. I asked a very good question earlier about why would Ruby's mom then basically change the locks, shut her out of her life,
and
then old Ruby at the end in what I thought was a very cavalier way of just saying, yeah, I never saw my mom ever again. It's like, oh, okay. But to me, it was like there's the whatever is said, and there's the screaming and the running. But then there's also the looks of hatred, like Ruby's mom in the car as she goes by, giving that death stare to Ruby, and then Kate does it later. And I thought that's not terror, that's something else.
Yeah.
But they never explain what that is either.
The only dialogue I saw was she said, "You're not my daughter." That was it. But she kind of, I know it's a moot point. She's kind of adopted her. So basically, fostered and then adopted. So basically, you're not technically my daughter, but you are my daughter. So she said, "You're not my daughter," didn't she?
I thought also the running away aspect was playing into Ruby's abandonment.
Well, but this is it. While I was elsewhere in limbo, Rachel, on the repetitive storyline syndrome, it's been interesting that in Space Babies, in Boom, you had, and in here, you had basically a kid who was not necessarily abandoned, but not looked after and then put in danger. Because if you look at Splice was just wandering the battlefield and then approached. Space Babies, you had, them, with the bogeyman. And it happened 3 times because it happened in Church on Ruby Road as well. So basically, this whole idea of coincidence and repeating the same storyline in different ways is really obviously leading us to realize she's another Clara. She's the impossible girl. There's something going on. Because she seems to always gravitate around people who are foundlings or people who have been abandoned or deserted or aren't being looked after by parents. Now, what did you make of this? Because obviously on engagement, you don't want to, I hated the fourth wall break in Devil's Court. What did you make of this? We saw Susan Twist again, but this time Ruby recognized her, really, didn't she? So where are we going with this? And I'm trying to think, well, when did Ruby recognize her? Is that because in Boom she saw that face on the hospital ambulance machine thing?
In Space Babies, wasn't that the face of the computer?
It was one of their crew.
The crew.
Yeah.
I think you're just meant to think that it's a reference. I don't know if it's one of the specific ones, but she's obviously seen her a number of times now, and it's just to ramp up the mystery.
But that's my question here. Were you engaged? Are you going, I'm loving this, more?
We're back at sort of like the problem I have with all of this type of thing. This is where I was saying about RTD having taken this off Stephen Moffat. I'm willing to suspend an amount of time that it will be explained either at the end of this series or throughout the second series, and same indulgence I gave to watching Stephen Moffat's first 2 series. I can only judge it once that's happened. I think, again, sort of your point about someone just watching these in any order becomes a bit odd because of this.
Now, Mrs. Flood, I've got him here because Mrs. Flood was also in it. Another device, another continuous thread. Now, I saw today there were some intriguing discussions going on that every time so far you see Mrs. Flood, she's pottering out the front. She goes and empties the bin. She goes down those steps and then back up. And somebody's saying, has she got a TARDIS there? What's going on? You don't really see her doing anything else but just hovering in this space and
Or
busying
she's
herself.
stuck in her own time loop.
Yes. Well, that's very true. Yes, because she seems to be in this repetitive. She's like a hamster in a wheel, isn't she? She just goes down there, up
Yeah.
there, and she's emptying the bins and all the rest of it. I mean, another loophole I thought while we're on it is when she said you're on your phone to your mother. How the hell did she know she was on her phone to her mother?
Oh, maybe because she's old. Maybe she's old Ruby too, and she knows who she was calling.
Do you want to know? I want to ask. I put this to Brendan earlier. Is this all becoming a bit too predictable? Because little while ago, this was before the series started, threw out several times in some way, shape, or form that we were going to see old Ruby, and old Ruby will have an effect on young Ruby in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what it was going to be, and then I was like, and then it happened yesterday in 73 yards, and it's like, well, I didn't really guess. I just sort of like had a feeling that might happen. Is it getting too predictable? Oh,
Well, I think as well as ripping himself off on Stephen Moffat and various other things, there is an awful lot of tropes that Russell Davies is using in this. Just to take the example of the dodgy politician, that felt very like The Dead Zone by Stephen King,
yes.
where the character gets exposed by someone who has a certain different perspective from the world, and that changed the future, and it changed someone who was going to have the nuclear codes and use them. And I was thinking, I've heard that somewhere before. Dead Zone.
But you see, this is it, Hugh. There's another trick that I forgot to mention earlier, because there's just so much in this. It's enjoyable to watch to a degree, but there were so many elements, as we've all said. And I want to link it with Melanie Weston Investigates. Ruby remembered her in a way, but now it's scrubbed as it was after the cotton was broken, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of playing around here with boundaries and, as you know, perception filters. And they mentioned that the TARDIS has a perception filter, which intrigued me because the miniscope, that big giant hand in Carnival of Monsters could see the TARDIS totally. Yeah. And of course, in Photo Doomsday, the Ubangans were desperately trying to get inside it, so the perception filter wasn't working there. And in 5 Doctors, the Cybermen were trying to blow the blooming thing up. So basically, this perception filter suddenly appeared. Anyway, I wonder with Mrs. Flood whether there is a perception, if I'm buying into this RTD-ness, tweeness, that Mrs. Flood is part of a kind of perception filter, because you only see her doing various little things. She's just there. I don't know. You
mean like there's somebody else like underneath that, and that's a projection?
As in, we're not seeing everything that's there. Like perception filter, you don't see the TARDIS, apparently. The fairies maybe took away Shooty. And the other thing is, did you think it was Ruby who was the one who waits?
Me?
Anybody, because when I watched that episode, I thought Ruby is the one who waits, because she waited how many years for the Doctor outside that TARDIS?
65, I think.
Yeah.
I have the timeline. She waited 65, so that hospital scene would have taken place in 2089. If you go by the fact that she was 65 years since she'd been followed.
Yeah.
Track it back. So that's a 2089.
But then if the time loop resets itself and disappears, is she really the one who waits?
Isn't the one who waits the Meeps boss, though?
Yeah.
Well, but that's Gary.
That'd be so cool if it was Ruby.
It wouldn't tie in with the Devil's Court part of it, where.
Yeah, what are you? She has.
But what are you? And noting that the one who waits is something to do with it, but not that. So if he does that, then I think he's, because how on earth can she be the Meeps boss and stuff? It doesn't feel like that. I think it might be emphasizing waiting in some way, but I don't think it's a.
It kills the theory that Mrs. Flood is an older Ruby, as most people were saying. People were saying, "Oh, it looks as though it's killed that one now." So Mrs. Flood is something else.
Yeah.
Maybe she's the alternate old Ruby.
Maybe
we have the old Ruby, and then we have the old Ruby.
There's still the theory that she's the Rani.
Yeah. Well, as they're using a lot of wigs for this one Ruby, aren't they? If all of these are the Rubies. Well,
and Steve, before I forget, one last thing. Because if you saw Friday's show, you know that I like to create alternate, what I think is alternate, more imaginative, more appealing titles for the episodes. So my alternate title for this one, which I think is a better title than 73 Yards, would be Shooty Who, Where Are You?
I won't sing that. You'll get copyright.
Well, yeah. I mean, we should be paying you for this, shouldn't we? I mean, come up with alternative titles. So yes. So the next time along,
how about I wish I'd gone to Specsavers?
Oh, now we're starting to go down that. We're going down the rabbit hole, aren't we? It's time.
Yeah.
So that let me just remind you, the overall judgment was that. And by the way, when I look at all the scores from each panelist and whether they're given an outstanding, they get, I'm how many outstandings are given, how many goods are given, how many improvements are given. We're halfway through the series, and this is where the series so far stands. You can see that improvement is needed has had 24 separate votes. You can see that in second place, just is Oblivion. They're neck and neck, aren't they? Good and Oblivion, which is fascinating. This series is Marmite. While we've got people in the thread who loved it, and that's fair cop, please join and stick with us because we just don't want to be an echo chamber. You can see there, though, that overall, intriguingly, it seems to be slightly more on the negative side is how it's getting judged. That's just as it is.
Can I ask Brendan, which of the 4 episodes so far, what's been the cumulative best ranked by the panel down to the lowest? Have you been keeping?
It's still the points do actually correlate to that.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
70. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's going. So basically, 73 Yards and Boom are just nibbling into good. And Space Babies, I think, was improvement needed, and Devil's Card was Oblivion. It was just no. That's where we've been judging. We're all together again midweek, 7 p.m. Wednesday, when there'll be a lot of nostalgia. Tomorrow, I'll be dropping this item, a really interesting interview with, like I say, one of our panelists. If you've enjoyed what we're delivering, please subscribe. Please join the gang. I take panelists as well. I'll have people on. So that was another enjoyable little show. It's certainly, I think the most entertaining bit was when I wasn't here. I'm sure it was. But thank you for keeping it going.
We're glad you came back.
Rachel, go on then. Your score. My scores, I haven't announced mine either, really. But overall,
no, it's right. I haven't done my engagement resolution in that yet. So I thought maybe you would like to know it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's because we got talking about other things. That's all. So mine, I gave it a 3.5, although you could probably round it up if you wanted to, because overall, for me, the episode was okay. I did get a bit bored when she got on the train. I switched off a little bit there, but it picked up again when Kate came into it. I thought the resolution was a bit predictable.
Yeah.
But like I say, it was fine. And well, my bar isn't actually very high, but there's one thing that the story really did remind me of, and it's a Big Finish audio drama, and it's called The Spectre of Lanyon Moor.
Oh, yes.
And that's what it really, really strongly reminded me of, because that goes into folklore and fugus and all sorts of things. And one of the characters in that meets a hiker, like we see there, out on the moors. And the hiker, well, unfortunately, spoilers, but the hiker dies in a situation shortly after that. But then I just think The Spectre of Lanymore is a lot better. But it does remind me of The Spectre of Lanymore. And Spectre is a favourite of mine, John. Oh, great, we're talking again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I gave it a 3.5, but it can be rounded up. It was the best one of the series so far since The Giggle. So
And that's what I think Melanie Weston Investigates was noticing. It's going up. I mean, we've been as honest as we can, but it seems to be going up at the moment. If we want to kind of take a conclusion from it.
The concepts behind this episode are actually really good concepts, and they were for Boom as well. It's just that some of it didn't pay off for me personally. Like, but if you enjoyed it, that's absolutely fine. You are allowed to like things.
Totally.
But
as I was but on our midweek last week, for example, we did do, the best part 3s. This week we're going to do our favorite part 1s on the classic era. And so just come on, Doctor Who fans.
I gotta ask, Brendan, put back that episode 3 graphic, which I think is fantastic for people who didn't see it. Isn't this an amazing graphic? I mean, you got to give props. I'm serious. Got to give props to Brendan, who I think comes up with the most creative graphics. I mean, there's little elements here from several of our picks and stuff, but that's just tremendous.
It looks quite like a 1970s Fontana sci-fi cover. I would expect that to be written by E. Van Volt.
Oh, well, there you go. And I'm just a little
good
middle
job,
lad.
Brendan.
Yeah, very good job.
Thank you. Well, we aim to please. What will I do with part 1s? God help me now. So please tune in on Wednesday, midweeks, Wednesday, 7 p.m. I've shown you the one I'm dropping on Monday, and on Tuesday it'll be The Saloon. And of course, I'm just checking on the thread there. Yes. So everybody, thank you for your time. Thank you for holding it together while the lightning was kicking off here. It was actually more moody here than it was on 73 yards. Right.
And thanks to the chat. Chat was great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
really
chat.
enjoyable. So everybody, see you either tomorrow, see you Tuesday, see you Wednesday. Look out for Rachel's channel. Thank you, team. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
See you. Night.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye.
watching. Bye.
I dare dance in case I get chucked off again.
No, there's 73 seconds to dance again. We'll do an all dance together.
Good night, everybody.
Night, everyone. Subscribe.
Good night. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Night, Mary Ellen.
Bye-bye, Doug.